Aussie Daniel Ricciardo has finished 9th in his final Formula One race with McLaren at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. It is understood that the 33-year-old will rejoin Red Bull, so he'll go back home, so to speak, as a development driver next year. Joining us live now is former F1 senior executive Mark Gallagher. Mark, good to see you. Thanks for your time. So is that a bit of a downgrade for Ricciardo being a development driver? How prestigious is that position?
I think development driver is probably a misnomer, if ever there was one, because Daniel really is going to Red Bull to take a year back, to step back. And Christian Horner, the team principal of Red Bull, has made it clear that his role will involve not a huge amount of driving, but quite a lot of public relations work, working with sponsors, and yes, of course, working with the team. And this gives Daniel an opportunity to really find out if retirement is the thing that he wants to do, or whether actually he can rediscover his motivation and his focus and get back behind the seat of a wheel of an F1 car for the following season.
Well, considering there weren't that many people vying for his signature, were they, at the moment? So what are the chances of him getting back on the grid the following year?
Actually, I think they're probably quite good, because really what's happened is that Daniel and McLaren and probably the whole paddock has realised that he's just slightly lost the momentum of his career, and there's a view that perhaps a little bit of time out may be exactly what he needs to sort of rediscover his mojo and come back. And I think, for example, when he tests the Red Bull, if it turns out that his testing times are really good, people will realise that perhaps there was something slightly wrong with the way the McLaren car worked for him, or the way that he worked with that car, and it may be that Red Bull will be the saviour for Daniel, which is kind of ironic.
Well, I mean, it was a pretty dominant year when it comes to Red Bull, and Verstappen, worthy champion, Mark?
Oh, absolutely. Record 15 Grand Prix victory. Somebody was sending me this morning, way back in 1988, Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna won 15 Grand Prix between them. And here we have Max Verstappen winning 15 races on his own in an incredible car. But in a competitive season, Ferrari gave them a very hard time, certainly in the first half of the season. But my goodness, Max just came back and became unstoppable.
Still Red Bull related. We just saw those pictures of Vettel who's now called it quits. What sort of a legacy does he have in the sport?
Incredible. 53 Grand Prix victories, 4 World Championship titles for Red Bull, finished second in the World Championship 3 times, including twice for Ferrari. I mean, this is a guy who really has left his mark on the sport, and I think will not completely walk away from it. I can see him having some kind of ambassadorial role going forward. But at the age of 35, 2 years older than Daniel Ricciardo, Sebastian's decided to call it a day.
Do you see Lewis Hamilton challenging again?
Absolutely. If Mercedes produced the competitive car that they had hoped to this year, and they got it wrong this year, but every indication is that Mercedes are going to come back strongly, and Lewis has lost none of his ability, none of his motivation, and he's still 4 years younger than Fernando Alonso, who's still going strong in Formula One. So age is not a limiting factor if the motivation is there.
Does the fire still burn, though?
It's really interesting. Alonso, for example, took 2 years away from Formula One and discovered he missed it so much he couldn't wait to come back. And he's driven brilliantly for the last couple of seasons. So it's not game over for Daniel Ricciardo by any chance. And certainly Lewis Hamilton seems to still have it in him.
True. Mark, good to see you. We'll talk to you again soon.